Shalom, shalom, Israel. It's your brother Benaiah ben Israel, coming to you with a short lesson on Purim, deliverance of Israel. That's Purim, the deliverance of Israel. Now, if you're not familiar with Purim, let me give a brief overview before we get started. So, no, Purim is not an official holy day commanded by the Most High Yahuwah to observe, nor is it found in the book of Leviticus or Numbers. However, it is a day set aside for remembrance established by our forefathers, commemorating the deliverance of Israel from none other than the hand of Esau. AKA Haman the Agite, son of Amalek, son of Eliphaz, and Timnah the Horite. Daughter of Seir the Horite. Family, Most High willing, we will have an in-depth lesson on the Horites coming soon, which will explain what's going on in Ukraine, as well as reveal the sons of perdition. However, that's a story for another day. So for this lesson, on the other hand, we will review the celebration of Purim and why this is in fact a day of celebration for so-called Negroes. Yes, family, Negroes, established for centuries, which we will prove momentarily. And for so-called African Americans, this is in fact a day established by your forefathers, not spiritual forefathers, by your literal forefathers, which is why going forward we should honor this feast day with family and friends. And with that, family, let's get started. To begin our journey, we need to first paint the portrait of the house of Judah before and during the time of Esther. You see, Aunt Esther lived in Persia, in the land of which the house of Judah was carried away captive by the king of Babylon, which was later conquered by Persia. That is, the Persian kingdom in which Aunt Esther lived around 479 BC. However, when we look back at history, before the time of the Persian Empire and before the time of the Babylonian Empire, we arrive at the time of the Persian Empire, which laid siege to the cities of Judah, which included the city of Lachish. And after breaking the walls of Lachish and ransacking the city, the Assyrian army would return home and commemorate their victory at Lachish by chiseling a snapshot of both the Persians and the nappy-headed sons of Judah. And these unmistakable, prominent Negroid features are on display today at the British Museum. And available online for anyone to see and confirm that Israel was indeed a Negroid people. The stone monument dates back to around 681 BC, which was before the time of the Babylonian Empire. And with that, let's take a look at how we can view and confirm the Black Israelites etched in stone in the Lachish relief. We begin by typing the words British Museum, Lachish Relief in the search bar. Then next, scroll down and select the first British Museum link. And then make sure you're on museum number 124911. That's 124911. And then once you're on the page, you can view the Israelites by navigating to the bottom of the page and locating the tiles at the bottom of the page. And then select the fourth tile from the left. That's the fourth tile from the left. And you can find the Israelites on the page by locating the prisoners on the page with beards. With their hands raised or laying prostrate before the king. And you can notice the prominent, nappy, woolly hair of the Israelites. This is just one confirmation that the Israelites were and are a Negroid people. Did you know that researchers in Israel refuse to publish DNA data regarding ancient DNA samples taken specifically from the territory of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi? Any guesses why that is? They publish samples from northern Israel, but refuse to publish samples from southern Judea. Why is that? Perhaps it's the blood of the ancient Negro, which matches your blood, that they're afraid of. However, even though Judean DNA isn't available, we do have the skulls from the ancient city of Judea called Lachish, in which all the skulls were identified as Egypto-Nubian, aka Negro skulls. As the following reference reads, it reads, Archaeology and Forensic Anthropology, the 701 BCE time capsule of Lachish. And it reads, no ancient Judean DNA samples have ever been formally published. But we do have a time capsule of data from 701 BCE found at the Judean city of Lachish in the form of a mass grave that was excavated there. And the next reference reads, the first report on the Lachish skulls included a thorough examination of pathology, metrics, artificial deformation, and epigenetic affinity. Utilizing craniometrics, Risden concluded that the group was fairly similar to dynastic Egyptian material. In fact, he stated that the entire population was of foreign origin, representing descendants of a group derived primarily from Upper Egypt. Skipping ahead, he concluded that the group was fairly heterogeneous, having close relationships to North African, Egyptian, and Nubian groups, thus lending support to an Egypto-Nubian presence. Researchers at first appeared to be confused with all the black folks in the city of Judah, declaring them a population of foreigners. However, researchers later confirmed that these were not foreigners at all. They were in fact native to the land of Judah. As the next reference reads, One of the first to oppose the idea of an Egyptian origin was Keith, who felt that the Lachish inhabitants were markedly different from Egyptians. Though his analysis was rather anecdotal, others have since concurred, arguing that the people of Lachish were indigenous, closely related to pre-Middle Bronze Age skeletons in Palestine and the modern-day Bedouin. Now that we've established the blackness of Israel according to the British Museum and cranial analysis, we can now take a closer look at Israel's Babylonian captivity with greater accuracy. Let's begin by reviewing the genealogy of a descendant of Jeconiah who was led into captivity in Babylon and eventually into Spain and Portugal. And once there, he changed his name to Negro. According to the following genealogy, some of the sons of King David were taken into captivity into Babylon, while others were taken into Spain. Now, this particular record details a son of King Jeconiah taken into Babylon, whose descendant, Zerubbabel, would later leave Babylon and eventually make his way into Spain with the other sons of King David. And once in Spain and Portugal, some of the descendants of King Jeconiah, king of Judah, renamed themselves Negro, as the following reference reads, Yaya, a Portuguese family of the Middle Ages, members of which were prominent in Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Turkey. Certain individuals of the family bore the additional cognomen Negro, with reference to the Moors from whom several of their estates had been obtained. The more prominent members of the family are as follows. Now, according to this genealogy record, these Negroes moved from Spain to Portugal to Turkey and then to Poland. That's Spain, Portugal, Turkey, Poland. Spain, Portugal, Turkey, Poland. In other words, the descendants of these refugees today would match ancient DNA extracted from Spain, Portugal, Turkey, Poland. And with that in mind, let's take a look at ancient DNA matches of the so-called Negro today. And for this example, let's take a look at my DNA matches in mytrueancestry.com. And here you'll notice ancient DNA matches in Spain, Portugal, Turkey, Poland. That's Spain, Portugal, Turkey, and Poland. Identical to the genealogy listed for the sons of the Negroes, the descendants of Jeconiah. Not only that, we can also find DNA matches identical to the profile of the Bavarian Jews, who have matches in Hungary, Bavaria, Northeast Germany, and Southern Russia. You see, family, many Negroes today carry the names of Portuguese and Spanish Jews, and they don't even know it. In fact, the name Negro itself is a Spanish and Portuguese Jew surname. Yes, we are literally called by a Sephardic Israelite surname. And you can also find famous, well-known so-called African Americans with Sephardic surnames, and they don't even know it. For example, if you open your web browser and type in Sephardic surname dictionary and press enter, then you'll find a link called sephardim.com. Now click on the link, and then once you're on the web page, search the Sephardic dictionary for the name Sanders, as in Deion Sanders. And yes, as you can see, the name Sanders is a Sephardic Israelite name, and many don't even know it. And ironically, Coach Prime is headed to coach in the Pac-12. not only do we find Coach Prime in the Sephardic Israelite database, we can find many other famous athletes in this database as well. So many people today are debating who is the greatest NBA basketball players of all time. Is it MJ, Michael Jordan, or LeBron James? Well, you know what, family? Don't even worry about it, because both LeBron and Jordan's last names in the Sephardic Israelite database, as well as your favorite Charles Barkley, who loves criticizing fellow black folks whenever he has an opportunity. Now note, Charles Barkley's last name is spelled differently in the dictionary. However, phonetically, it has the same pronunciation. Now that's just terrible, just straight terrible. That's just terrible.
Well, what about me? What about the Big Diesel?
Well, similar to Charles Barkley's name, you can also find a derivative of Shaquille O'Neal's name in the Sephardic Israelite surname database. Although his name is spelled differently, phonetically it sounds similar.
So you saying I'm a Hebrews to Negroes?
Man, that's just terrible. That's just straight terrible. And once you realize Sephardic Jews were consistently described as black, using old references published in the early 1800s or older, and that many of these Jews come from the area near and around the city of Lachish, and that they would look identical to the picture of the Lachish Jews displayed at the British Museum. And also, once you discover that roughly 800,000 to 600,000 of these dark-skinned, woolly-haired Jews were persecuted and expelled in Spain and Portugal less than 10 years before the start of the transatlantic slave trade, sent to the exact locations in Africa where the transatlantic slave trade would begin less than 15 to 20 years later, and that the Manuelian laws which govern the transatlantic slave trade were specifically authorized that these Sephardic Jews be taken as slaves. You will understand why there are several so-called African Americans today with Sephardic, Israelite, Judean, House of Judah names. And so now that we have a better understanding of the physical description of the captive house of Judah in Babylon, which later was conquered by Persia, let's read the story of Esther, which describes the Most High Yah's deliverance of the swarthy, woolly-headed House of Judah people. We begin our story with the southern kingdom of the House of Judah, taken away into captivity by the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. Destined and prophesied to toil in the land of their captivity for 70 years. However, long before Judah would be freed, the Babylonians would be conquered by the Persians, and Judah would be persecuted by a descendant of Esau's son Amalek, and Seir, the Horite. The descendants of Esau, who had a perpetual hatred for their Judean brothers, planned and schemed Judah's demise. But Yahuwah, however, would have other plans for the princes of Judah, turning Esau's attempted curse into a blessing, which would lead to the rise of Judah through the acts of Aunt Esther and Uncle Mordecai. By the favor and grace of Yahuwah, Aunt Esther would go on to marry the king of Persia, gaining the grace and favor of the king, and placed into a position to protect her people, the house of Judah. As the following reference reads, and it reads, "Now in Shushan Palace there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So it came to pass, when the king's commandments and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her and the 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maidens unto the best place of the house of the women. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. And so Esther would go on to marry King Ahasuerus and become queen of Persia, perfectly positioned by the Most High to make intercession on behalf of the house of Judah directly to the king when the time would arise. As the following reference reads, So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And so once Esther was established queen of Persia, Mordecai would help protect her kingdom by foiling a plot to overthrow King Ahasuerus. As the following reference reads, In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, 2 of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth, and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. Trouble in the kingdom of Persia was averted, or so they thought. For storm clouds were gathering on the horizon before the house of Judah. For Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, descendant of Amalek, also a descendant of Seir the Horite, would become enraged at Mordecai for not showing him reverence and bowing down in his presence. As the following reference reads, Now it came to pass when they spoke daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them. And they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand. And he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad, and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all the people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it pleases the king, let it be written, that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. And the king said unto Haman, The silver is given unto thee, the people also, to do with them as thy seemeth good to thee. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month. There was writing according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Osiris was it written, and sealed in the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post into every king's province, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for prey. The copy of the writing for commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. Upon hearing this most egregious declaration of death, Mordecai was tormented and horrified, and was moved to lament for his people, as the following reference reads, When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes, and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province whatsoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth with ashes. And so Queen Esther, upon hearing about the decree of death against the Jews, became very grieved, and reached out to Mordecai for understanding. And it reads, Then called Esther for Hatak, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai, to know what it was and why it was. So Hatak went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews, to destroy them. Also, he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king, to make supplication unto him, and to make requests before him for her people. Skipping ahead. And again Esther spake unto Hatak, and gave him commandment, and unto Mordecai, all the king's servants, and the people of the king's provinces, do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shalt be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way, and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house.
What? Oh my goodness. What?
Over against the king's house, the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight.
What? Oh my goodness.
And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of his scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall even be given unto thee half of the kingdom. Then Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. What is thy request? Even to have the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for him, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and the servants of the king. And Haman said moreover, Yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him,
Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet.
And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. On that night could not the king sleep. And he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who had sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honor and dignity has been done unto Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, Nothing is done for him. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outer court of the king's house to speak unto the king, to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said unto him, Behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king delighteth to honor more than to myself? And Haman answered to the king, For the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king uses to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and the horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Then the king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate. But Haman hasted to his house mourning, and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking to him, came the king's chamberlains, and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared.
What? Oh my goodness. What? What? Oh my goodness.
And so the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine,
Oh my goodness.
What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, and I and my people to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and the enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then saith the king, Will he force the queen before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbonah, one of the king's chamberlains, said before the king, Behold, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter towards Esther, and so Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write you also for the Jews, as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may no man reverse. Then there were the king's scribes called at the time in the 3rd month, that is, the month Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and the deputies, and rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, and 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing and according to their language. And he wrote in the name King Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries. Wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people in the province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. Wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people in the province which would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. Upon one day in all the province of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. And so the post that rode upon the mules and the camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandments. And the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king, in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness, joy and honor. The Jews gathered themselves together in the cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people, and all the rulers of the province, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces, for this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. And thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And so the Jews would go on to defeat and spoil their enemies. And a decree was made to establish a perpetual day of remembrance, to commemorate the day Yahuwah saved Israel from their enemies. As the following reference reads, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pure, that is, the lot, to consume them, and to destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device which he devised against the Jews should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged by the gallows. Wherefore they call these days Purim, after the name Pure. Therefore all the words of this letter, of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing, and according to their appointment every year. And that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed.